According to the U.S. Census Bureau, over 3 million children, or 4.3% of the under 18 population, had a disability as of 2019, which is up 0.4% from 2008. The Bureau also reports that 6.2%, or 2.8 million kids between the ages of 5 and 15 have a disability. Finally, the Bureau says about 20% of Americans ages 16 to 64 suffer from either a mental, emotional, or physical impairment. Katie and Steve Keene are on the front lines of this fight. They have a big family, including 2 kids with special needs. They're family success coaches who have developed systems and tips to ensure that all families have the tools in the toolbox in order to foster thriving homes, marriages, and kids. They joined me this week to provide me the blueprint of how they put so many families on the road to success. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. The Keens say that their story is filled with challenges, heartaches, and overcoming obstacles which will inspire you. So I asked them to begin our conversation by giving me a 360-degree view of their life, their challenges, and their triumphs.
Absolutely. We would love to. Do you want to start? You want me to start? We got a big story, Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, I've got all the time in the world, so take as much time as you need.
All right.
Okay. Well, so we were stationed overseas when our first child was born, and the day after, like the next morning after he was born, he started to have seizures, and so we really began our special needs journey as parents, within 24 hours of our first child being born. And we were overseas, so we were away from family. I was supposed to leave from Italy to go to Africa within 2 days. So I was getting ready to leave the continent on a military deployment, which means she would have been left there by herself. But then because of the seriousness of the situation, she and my son were medevaced up to Germany from Italy. And so they got sent up there to a larger treatment facility, and I ended up trying to catch up with them the next day. And that was like crazy, rapid fire, all these different things happening, totally out of our control. But then everything was lining up well enough that we were able to get help. I was able to go up there. I was able to forego going on that deployment down to Africa. Somebody was able to go in my place so I could come up and be with Katie and our son. And then we ended up being sent back to America ahead of schedule from when we were supposed to have been. And so that was just like bam, 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 all of these things happening, one thing after the other. And it was a really strong introduction to parenthood, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So we ended up immediately launching into therapy with our son. And of course, as new parents, we could think of nothing but his well-being. And thankfully, he ended up by 14 months old. The seizures had resolved. We had found out he had a stroke. I don't know if you had mentioned that. I think you did. No, he had had a stroke while he was being born. So they didn't know, would he walk or talk or have any ability to care for himself. And so he ended up actually at 14 months being ahead, which was amazing, quite a shock. And so we proceeded to have another child. And over the course of the next few years, as we had children, most of them ended up with forms of special needs. Our daughter has still got some educational disabilities, and she had a whole lot of things that we ended up finding out about that really were a bad prognosis. And we had to learn, because of our son and then our daughter and then the preceding children, how to overcome what mindset you can have as a parent when you're told certain things about your child's diagnosis, and then they give you the prognosis. And we had to choose, did we believe those prognoses or not? And we always chose not to. And so
they were very, very limiting, very restrictive.
That's right. And because we chose not to believe those things, and we worked so hard to always research and find resources and ask people and roll up our sleeves and do the work to help our kids. And our kids have made progress they shouldn't have made. To this day, our fourth child has very severe disabilities and epilepsy that is life-threatening. But even he is able to speed read and do things that people would not believe he can do because of the work that we've done with him. So we definitely haven't had I would say, an easy time parenting, but boy, are they worth it. It's been amazing. It's been a rich journey too.
And since you bring up your compelling story, I'm curious to ask you about how this has affected your marriage and any advice you may have for parents with special needs or kids with special needs and their parents, and how to navigate the time of getting the diagnosis and making sure that they live a fulfilling life.
Yes, it's such an important question too, Kevin, because what we've seen is that there are statistics showing that families with special needs children often do have a divorce that's at a higher rate. And we believe a lot of that is because people aren't trained how to deal with grief. There's already a lot of divorce to begin with, and a lot of lack of communication in marriages. And when you add in the element of grieving what you thought your child's life would look like, you can then lose sight of what's actually important in your life, which is your child and their current reality, and making it as great as it can be, even if it looks different than you thought it would look, and your spouse. And so for us, we really suggest to parents that if they need to get into counseling to learn to communicate, to learn to grieve, they should do that, and don't allow any stigma about counseling to stop you. And if you can't do counseling, find a couple in your area who is steady, who has a good marriage, who's willing to help step in and help you moderate conversations if you need to. And then forgive each other, give grace to each other. Remember, you're both hurting, even if you express it differently, and that you need each other, and your child needs both of you desperately to be able to have the most resources possible. And then, I don't want to keep talking for too long, but for the child, there's a beautiful poem. I wish I could remember who it's written by, but essentially the poem discusses how you're getting ready for a trip and you think you're going to Italy, and you get prepared and you're so excited and you have all your brochures and you've packed your bags and you get on the plane, and when you land, you're in Holland. And you're so surprised because this isn't where you planned on. This isn't what you had the guidebooks for. This isn't where you had packed for. And that you have to realize that Holland is beautiful too. And I love the poem because it's written for special needs parents to try to express that even though you thought your child was going to be born one way, It's not a mistake that your child is the way they are. This is your beautiful child. They are precious and they are gorgeous. This is just a different destination than you expected, but look at it. It's beautiful, you know? And so anyway, just remember your kid is your kid, no matter what.
Absolutely. You know, I always tell people that everybody's portrait of success is different, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
it all depends on which direction you want to take in life to be successful. But Steve, I'm curious to also ask you, as a dad of special needs kids, how have you helped fathers through the years sort of navigate their own sort of emotions when they find out that they have special needs children?
Yeah, a lot of times the dads are uninvolved, and that's a shame. So the first thing that I would say to a dad is, you know, hopefully you have made a lifelong commitment to your wife and to your family, and you need to abide by that. You need to not just step in and help. You need to be the leader in the family, and you need to demonstrate that love to your family in all situations. And you know, there's a lot of pressure on dads to begin with, right? To go to work and to provide for their family, and they have a lot of really high expectations they have to live up to. And then the dad, of course, has all these ideas for, well, you know, my son or my daughter, and this is what I'm planning to do when my kid is born. And then, you know, your kid may not be able to do those things with you, but you got to be flexible. And you got to do what they can do, right? And you got to challenge them just the same. So I know there's a lot of dads who think, this isn't what I planned for, and I'm out of here. And unfortunately, that happens all too often. But I would really want to encourage dads to stay in there and provide for your family and be a beautiful witness to your family. And, you know, don't give up on them. They need you terribly, you know, and it doesn't matter what the outcome is or it doesn't matter, rather, you know, whether your child is considered to be typical or atypical, that kid needs you desperately. And I would really encourage you to stay involved and to love your kid and to be a blessing to that kid.
The core foundation of the Keene's work is centered around providing families with tips and structure to build strong marriages, thriving families, and raising successful kids. The Keenes themselves have been married now for over 20 years, so I was curious to ask them their message to newlyweds in order to get their marriages off to a strong start.
Well, if we were to speak to first-time parents, one of the sets of couples that we're helping right now actually have a little 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And it's wonderful because the feedback that they've been giving us is that they didn't know a lot of the things that we're teaching them that are basic foundations for good communication between themselves and gentle parenting with their kids as the kids age and as they hit different developmental stages, and ways that they can make heart connections with their child. And so we teach the families in our program how to basically, almost like setting up a business. Businesses spend a lot of time and a lot of money looking at having a vision for their business, looking at having goals for their business, looking at having a team culture for their business, looking at how they want to govern their employees, how the different employees will divide up the work, and getting all those things into place. But families don't do that too often. And when you have that similar structure in a family, it's incredible because it allows the parents to get on the same page. No longer do you have unmet expectations that cause all kinds of conflict because you've talked it through. You have gotten the expectations discussed and set up And now you can deal with one another in a kinder, more connected way. And the same thing happens when you're both seeing the same vision and you have the same goals because you've worked together to create them. You're no longer tugging apart. You're actually working together, pulling together in your family. And that translates down to the kids. It reduces the tension and conflict with the kids, and it allows teamwork to happen. It creates a positive environment where, just like in a business, they focus on team culture. Well, you do in the family too. You focus on the family culture and the teamwork, and on assigning each individual their unique and important parts to play that grow the children in independence and in self-confidence and allow for connection between the parents and the kids. So that's sort of some of the basics that we would walk a new family through.
According to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, 90% of teens ages 13 through 17 use social media. Furthermore, 75% of those teens report having at least one active social media account. And 51% of American teens report visiting at least one social media site daily. 2/3 of American teens have internet capabilities on their mobile devices. And the Keens say the key to using social media in a positive way when raising kids is everything in moderation and making sure they're using the platforms for their appropriate purposes.
Well, most of our kids have no access to it
without management,
because they just don't have a need for it, because most of everything in there is just sort of consumer based. Like, it's advertisements to you, it's stuff coming to you. We spend more time with learning, right? Computer based learning rather than computer based entertainment and consumption. And for our older children, then it is moderated so that we make sure that the type of stuff that they're seeing is quality content, right? And to a large degree, we do the same thing for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So we don't spend time in the consumption of social media. We try to spend more time in the production of it, things that will be positive and encouraging and informative for families.
And we use things like filters to help protect our children, as well as, like Steve said, for younger children, they aren't on social media at all. We kind of look at using media and teaching the children to use social media as the same as teaching them to drive a car. It needs to be done with parent supervision, step by step, explaining it, because it can be dangerous. If you look at some of the research, it has great benefits when used correctly, just like a car, but it has great danger when used incorrectly, just like a car. So we try to step through that process with them, and we do have, our oldest is 17 and our next is 15. And so that is a stage that we have been working through over the last few years with them. We currently do not allow our 12-year-old and our younger children to be on social media, but within the next couple of years, we'll begin the training phase for our 12-year-old so that he learns the proper way to use social media. And again, like Steve said, we focus mainly on the producer side versus the consumer side. We want each of our children to come out of high school with a functioning business. And in order to do that, they need to understand the use of social media as a very effective tool. And so that is the way that we're navigating through that.
And as you guys know, I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. So that simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally. But I also believe that it's always important to lead by example when it comes to access to opportunities for kids with special needs. So I'm curious, as parents, how hard do you work to make sure that your kids with special needs have the same access to societal opportunities?
Well, for us, thankfully, that hasn't been terribly much a challenge because we have, thankfully, pretty good insurance. So, for access to medical stuff that's not out of pocket, which we do have quite a lot of that, we've had wonderful opportunities to do therapy. So, we've been blessed in that regard. And as far as our schooling and our social world, because of special needs, not initially, but later on, we chose to homeschool. Initially, we chose to homeschool for other reasons. And then as the special needs came in and we had testing done with our children, and it became a very obvious and apparent opportunity for us to tweak and tailor their educational needs precisely to have them excel and be able to learn optimally. Wherever they could speed up, we were able to allow them to, and wherever they needed to slow down, we were able to allow them to and to get the tutoring there. And in doing that, we were able to select amazing communities of people because unlike many incorrect assumptions of homeschoolers, many people think that they're very unsocialized. It's quite the opposite. Our children and every homeschooler we know, and every homeschool expert that you may speak to will tell you that we have an ample opportunity, more than people who are public schooled, to socialize with people from all backgrounds, all ages, and all abilities. And we make the intentional purpose to go do so. So our children have not participated in sports, but that is because we had all kinds of special needs that, like a stroke. Our neurologist said, please don't do that. But we know that locally, many of our special needs friends do. There's an amazing Special Olympics group here. So for our family, we have thankfully not come up against a lot of the opposition of accessing things for our children, but I think that's partly our community, partly our lifestyle. And I know that for some people, though, that is a challenge. So, and it's unfortunate.
Steve, did you have anything to add to this part of the conversation?
Well, we found it to be very helpful to be homeschoolers in that sense, and that we had more control over our schedule.
Mhm.
And so where there were opportunities for us to go and do things before the coronavirus pandemic, we were able to go out and enjoy those. And it was a little easier to do so on our own time schedule with that sort of thing. But that's been our experience. Not everybody has that same experience. And so we haven't really found it to be as difficult, perhaps, as others, but we haven't found it to be difficult to go out and to have the opportunities to engage in society or to participate in anything that we wanted to do. Now, because of health issues, we don't go into the public very often. So going to movie theaters and restaurants and things like that, we couldn't do that a lot of times to begin with. And so that didn't really change with the onset of COVID-19. But once that is behind us, then we'll see if we're able to get out and do that kind of stuff. But that's the really limiting factor for us these days.
And as your kids get older and explore the possibility of college, I'm wondering if you're worried at all about setting them out into society, specifically because of the political climate and the world we live in today. How do you think we prepare kids today to focus on college, but also having a voice in societal life as well?
Well, we have had some conversations on our podcast with a couple of people who have had to navigate that. We have not yet needed to. But again, it's only probably 5 to 7 years before we will have to consider that. But the wonderful people that we've interviewed have said that in their recommendation, it's really a matter of connecting with the right people. It's a matter of looking for those, like one of our friends works for Disability In. It's a organization that helps people with disabilities be included and be able to find jobs and to get into college. And it's amazing. And another of our friends who came on our podcast, she also has cerebral palsy. And so she was discussing some of the workplace issues. And, so really we've just been learning about that mainly from others. We haven't had our own firsthand experience yet, but for what we have done for our children so far in that regard is really building inside of them a sense of self and a sense of value and a sense of how important their uniqueness is to the world. And that if anybody rejects the way that they are uniquely made, it is not something that's intrinsic in our child. It's a lack in the person who cannot see their value. And that the unfortunate discrimination that's out there against people with disabilities is a lack of understanding. And it's something that we want our children, and we impress upon our children all the time, to understand that they bring a richness and they bring a beauty and they bring a diversity that is incredible. They bring something to the lives of those around them and the lives of those that love them and accept them that is so incredible and so pure that anyone who rejects that, they're losing out. And we make sure our children know that without a doubt. And we have conversations about that frequently. And we have many friends who have disabilities, and we make sure that we have those sorts of conversations as well with those families. And I think that's really probably the most where it starts. And all of our successful friends with disabilities, it started with their parents really helping them see their value, so that when they encountered the outside rough world that is not kind, it really could, as much as possible, roll off of them. So I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think there's a sign in my office that says that we're all given a platform to make a difference, and it's incumbent upon all of us to decide which direction we want to go. So absolutely, I think creating an individual identity is important, right? And I think when you talk about raising kids with special needs, and Steve, I'm curious to ask you this question: how important is it for you to give them a sense of empowerment in everything they do?
It's massively important, okay? Because inside of our home, that is going to be their first experience and their exposure to how they should be loved and regarded, right? And that needs to be done well inside of the home, because you can reasonably expect that outside of the home, they're going to experience discrimination and disapproval for things that are well outside of their ability to control, right? And so we set the expectation for our children. So in their understanding, there is an expectation for equal treatment and for people to understand that because maybe they communicate differently or they cannot communicate at all, that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. Right? And so they need to be able to have that sort of positive mental aspect, that mindset. They need to be able to know you're okay, right? You were loved. You can love yourself. There will be plenty of others who will love you. I just want you to know there's going to be plenty of other people out there who are going to look at you differently, and they're not going to be loving. They're the ones that are wrong. Right.
We make sure that that is very, very impressed upon our children regularly. And when they have come across people who aren't loving, we let them know, well, those aren't your people.
Yeah, we all have ability to make decisions on who we add into our inner circle. Absolutely. And I'm also curious to bring this back to marriage for a second and ask the two of you about the importance of nurturing a strong marriage and also raising kids in a on your mind, but how do you go about also nurturing the marriage away from raising kids?
Mm. Well, that can be very challenging when you have special needs kids because you can't always get away. And we've been blessed a few times to be able to get away because I had parents locally who, for now, locally who were able a couple of times to come, and they were able to medically manage our children's needs alongside of our oldest child, who is just this amazing, compassionate young man who loves to help his siblings. So we were able to escape that way, but that is not always possible. So we actually have a habit of looking for date opportunities wherever we can, even if that means literally we will walk. We have a long driveway. We will go on trash night to grab, each of us grab a trash can, hold hands with the hands that are not holding the trash can, and walk to the end of the driveway. And that's a date sometimes. If our oldest is available and is able to watch his younger siblings, then we will go walk around the neighborhood sometimes, or we would pay him sometimes and we would go to the movies, but we keep our cell phones right with us in case there was a need. That way we didn't go far. We were just a couple minutes away, but you know, we could do those sorts of things because we had the blessing of having someone old enough and my parents nearby enough to be able to allow us those brief escapes. But because it's not always possible for parents, you can also do things like put the kids to bed and then have a date night at home. We used to do that as well. And when finances are tight because out-of-pocket expenses are high, same thing. You can still turn on, you know, Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever you have, and just watch a movie together or have time to talk. That's even better. We highly recommend talking versus movies, you know, and just do things that connect you. We have a habit of doing something called couch time. Do you want to explain that?
Well, that's just where we will find a time each day to have a period of being uninterrupted by the children. So even if the kids are in the room, we are there and we're able to talk. We're able to catch up from the workday or plan for what we're going to do the night or the weekend, you know, whatever, that type of stuff. But it is an opportunity for us to connect here inside of the home without any interruptions.
Yeah.
And so for families, that's really important, regardless of whether you have kids or whether you have kids with special needs or whatever the case. It's very important for you to work on your marriage the same as you would anything else that's important to you. So the marriage relationship is important, whether you have children or not. And so for us, we've always worked hard to do that. And, you know, it's a deliberate action. It's a deliberate process.
Something else that we do that also helps, because you mentioned, you know, how do we maintain our marriage separate from our children? And one way that we do that is we have always made sure the children understand that they don't get between us. We are a united, loving, but united front with our children, and we make decisions together. And if they ask one of us, we will discuss things with the other if it's something that needs to have both of us decide. And we don't disagree with the other one in front of the children. We will discuss things separately if we have any kind of a disagreement. It doesn't mean the children haven't seen us have good conversations. We want our children to understand how to have good communication. But if there's something that we, you know, if I don't like a decision he made or he doesn't like a decision I made, we do not argue or any of that in front of our children at all. We are a united marital front. And it's sort of like in the military, like, you know, the levels that you have, and you don't jump rank. The kids don't get to be in charge and they don't get to come between mom and dad. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious to ask you about how you discover your own individual identities, because being married and raising kids, it's also important to find your own individual identity. So I'm curious, when you're not working or raising kids, how do you find your own individual identities? What do you guys like to do for fun?
Yeah, well, that can definitely be a real challenge. I like to paint and I like to do crafts, and I've actually transferred a lot of that love to our children. And I like to read. And Steve really enjoys, he gets up early so he can have time by himself before anybody else is awake. So
yeah, that's about it for me. because the things that I liked to do, long distance running or scuba diving and things like that, are much harder to do these days. And so finding things that are less active or less time consuming are the way to go for me. So I developed a love for cooking.
And he's good at it.
And so being able to do that, and then that's a really good thing to then be able to teach to the children and share with them. And so they develop a love for that too.
And now it's paying off because the older ones love it and we get to benefit from that.
That's right.
It started out not so tasty when they were little, though. I will warn all parents listening. You will have to eat some things that you might just have to say, this is great. And then thank them for their hard work.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have the whole creativity thing down pat, right? So that's good.
We try.
Yes.
So I'm just curious to quickly go back to ask you about the pandemic and how you, what advice you may have for parents who are struggling with kids with special needs to make sure that they're still socially engaged in society.
Yeah. For us, we have had a circle of friends who, because of, like Steve had mentioned, we have real severe issues with getting exposed. We always had those problems because of some immune things with one of our children. And so we always had to be careful. When the pandemic started, we were a little surprised because we were like, well, gosh, I guess we kind of always lived a little like this. We just didn't realize it. But we were able to create a circle of friends who were willing to self-quarantine and limit their exposure and then come over and have time spent with us. And we set up a rotating schedule. And then we increased our number of times that we would Zoom with friends and Zoom with family. And we also allowed the children to have more pets and spent some time, Steve spent some real severe amounts of time with the children building a chicken coop. And we had petitioned the neighborhood already to change the HOA covenants. So we were allowed to have some chickens. So we did, we got them before we ever had planned on it. And so our children surprisingly really didn't feel lonely because we kept their friends in their life and we made sure that we filled in some gaps where we could with Zoom and made sure we had, good intentional time set aside for our family. And I know that's not been the case for everyone because especially parents, who are either single parents or have maybe only one child that doesn't have their siblings to be there as friends. That's got to have been much harder than what we experienced. And I'm so sorry for that, but I hope that they can reach out and find a little pod community of people that are willing to rotate and safely spend some time with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the value of human connection and social interaction we won't take for granted.
Yes, that's true.
And I'm curious to ask you about your podcast, Family Success Secrets, and all the great work you do through that medium.
Oh, we have had a blast with that.
Yeah, so what we do there is we have a weekly podcast. It releases every Wednesday morning. And one week will be Katie and I talking about a topic that's of interest to us that we can share with the group. And then the following week, it will be with a special guest who will come on and we'll get to have a conversation with them and learn about them, about what they do, and share that sort of wisdom with the audience. And then we rotate it back and forth like that. So we're getting close to about 30 episodes now. And we've got quite a lot of those recorded and ready to release as time goes by. So it's been fun that way to do that. The object initially was to be able to help families with successful strategies for maintaining their health, their relationships, and their finances. And so we would give tips of things that we've learned over our 20 years of marriage and 17 years of parenting that would help any family, whether they have special needs children or not. And then obviously having the guests who would come on, they would share something either from their personal or professional expertise that would also be more or less a blessing for families. Things that they can do at home easy, right? Strategies for quick wins at home that will help bring success to families.
Well, I tell you, if you ever need a guest, I'm only an email away.
That sounds great, Kevin. Thank you.
So yeah, my final question for you is I'm curious to ask you about your own individual and collective legacy as people and parents. How do you want that to be defined?
Well, for us, we have always wanted to have a legacy where the children have grown up in a good home, they love each other, and that will continue for all of their lives. So after Katie and I have moved on to glory, the kids are there. They still love and stay in touch with one another. They're building that into their families. They're building an entrepreneurial spirit into their families. They're passing that down from generation to generation. And so it's a really big question because there's a lot of different components to it, right? So there's the family relationships. We want that to pass down. The love for family, we want that to pass down. The ability to provide for yourself, to govern yourself, to be able to bless others and teach that to each successive generation. That's very important to us.
Yeah, as well as teaching them how to maintain their health. That's also very important. We've had a lot of deep learning on that in our family due to the different needs of our children. And that's become part of our family culture and lifestyle as well, is to really understand taking care of our health and taking care of the earth around us, and trying to nurture and take care of our community around us too.
Yeah, and very important to take care of each other,
Yes.
because it's not somebody's responsibility outside of our family to take care of our family. We take that very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to get connected with the two of you, what's the best way they can do that?
Sure. So if people want to find us on Facebook, we're there. We have a page and a group called Family Success Secrets, and you'll see our picture there. On Instagram, the exact same thing, Family Success Secrets. And if they'd like to get on our email list, if they want to reply to one of our newsletters, we will directly communicate via email. And the way to do that is just to go to podcast.familysuccesssecrets.com, and they can sign right up, get a free quick overnight tip for a fast win to start having a really good increase in family success and happiness, and then can interact with us that way too.
Well, Katie and Steve, I have to tell you, I learned a lot, had a lot of fun, and I want to thank you for the good work that you do in trying to advance forward the needs and responsibilities and rights of children with special needs. It's something that we share a mutual passion for. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Your time, insights, and perspectives are most appreciated.
Thank you so much for having us, Kevin. This has been such a joy and such an honor.
Yeah, it's been real fun. We appreciate you having us on your show, man.